This is not a large needle tube with big wings, but a pre-World War II jet aircraft design that uses the most advanced stamping engine technology today. Unfortunately, its fate was tumultuous, and it did not become a reality until the 1950s after the war. This is a story about the pioneer of the stamping engine, the LeDuc 022. With the rise of hypersonic aircraft in recent years, the stamping jet engine has once again entered the public eye. Few people know that the stamping engine, like the piston propeller engine, was born almost in the same era. In 1913, French engineer René Lorraine first proposed the concept of a jet engine, which utilizes the forward motion of the engine itself to draw air into the combustion chamber, expand and eject it backward to propel the aircraft. This was only 10 years after the Wright brothers' successful flight of the Flyer 1. We discussed the stamping engine a long time ago. It actually has the same principle as the turbojet engine. Both compress the airflow first, then ignite and expand it to do work. However, the difference is that the turbojet engine compresses the air with a compressor, while the stamping engine directly compresses the air's kinetic energy, eliminating the compressor and the turbine that drives the compressor. Not only is it lightweight, but also has a simple structure, and the entire machine is fixed without moving parts. The only problem is where the kinetic energy of the air comes from. Since the stamping engine compresses the air's kinetic energy, it only has enough energy to compress when it reaches a certain speed. Therefore, it cannot work when it is stationary, and can only run after taking off. In 1929, another engineer named René Le Duc became obsessed with this concept. In his opinion, the inefficient propeller was a lousy design that hindered the plane from flying faster. Don't forget, biplanes were not yet at their peak at the time. And it was really unconventional to think like this. Based on this concept, Le Duc proposed the idea of a pulse jet engine, which provided propulsion by intermittently burning the propellant in the combustion chamber using valves to control the intake and exhaust of air. Little did he know that this concept would lead to the birth of the V-1 missile a few years later, which would drop a large bomb on the heads of the British. Although Le Duc proposed the concept of a pulse jet engine, he didn't like this invention and still had his heart set on developing a turbojet engine that could provide smooth continuous thrust using a continuous flow of air. In 1933, he received a small sum of money from the French government to begin experiments, and 3 years later, he finally produced a working prototype of a turbojet engine. Inspired by this prototype engine, in 1937, Le Duc signed a new contract with the French government to build a real jet-powered aircraft using this engine, called the LeDuc 010. The LeDuc 010 used a novel circular double-shell fuselage. The pilot sat in a narrow cockpit and could barely see anything, with a ring of gaps around him responsible for compressing the airflow. Since a turbojet engine cannot operate at zero velocity, the 010 plan was to be carried by an SE.161 airliner to high altitude and then dropped, after which the 010 would dive and ignite its turbojet engine once it reached sufficient speed. However, in 1939, World War II broke out and German tanks began sweeping across French territory. Helpless, Le Duc had to dismantle the completed 010 and hide it in a barn, but even that barn was bombed to ashes by the German Air Force. Looking at it from another angle, this might be for the better, as if the Germans had seized it, they would surely have tinkered with it and created more miraculous weapons. In the following years, everyone was busy fighting the war and had no time for such experimental projects. It wasn't until the end of World War II that Le Duc's research and development work slowly resumed, and a brand new 010 was rebuilt. In April 1949, the LeDuc 010, after being launched, fired its ramjet engine for the first time and used its own power to perform maneuvers such as climbing and turning. This success excited Le Duc, who immediately began designing a ramjet capable of using its own power for takeoff and landing. After scaling up the 010, the LeDuc 021 rolled off the production line, still unable to take off autonomously, but at least releasing the pilot's cockpit from the air intake. It completed more than 250 flights and reached a speed of Mach 0.95. Immediately afterwards, Le Duc brought out his ultimate solution, the 022. Compared to the previous 021, the 022 was fitted with a dual power plant for the first time, and SNECMA Adder 101D turbojet engine to power takeoff and landing, and a ramjet to start in the air and provide high-speed thrust. The airframe, like the 021, used a heavy barrel-shaped monocoque fuselage with one center monoplane leading edge swept back 35 degrees, a range-finding radar added to the nose, and a complete escape hatch integrated into the front of the fuselage including the plexiglass cockpit. In December 1956, the 022 made its first successful flight, utilizing a turbojet engine and achieving a successful takeoff and landing. In May 1957, the 022 ignited its first ramjet, and in December, the 022 reached its highest speed since it rolled off the line, Mach 1.15. If you focus only on the LeDuc 022, everything does look promising, but by this time more than 30 years have passed since the project began. And turbojet engines have long since evolved by leaps and bounds, with the French Nord 1500 Griffon being developed in parallel during the same period. With only one turbojet engine, it surpassed the LeDuc and reached more than Mach 2. The French Air Force gradually lost interest in the ramjet because this conventional power plant could provide the high-speed performance it wanted, and because the 022 cost too much money. After completing more than 140 successful flights, the LeDuc 022 caught fire while taxiing and was completely destroyed. The French Air Force, whose patience was all but gone, officially cancelled the LeDuc project in February 1958, and René Le Duc was so devastated that he never designed another aircraft. However, the scramjet concept is far from dead. In recent years, with the rise of hypersonic vehicles, scramjet engines have once again entered the limelight, and more aircraft powered by scramjet engines will continue to be born. But the aviation genius René Le Duc, who first turned this concept into reality, has been slowly forgotten. Thank you for reading this article, and remember to leave a comment before you go. This is Lookout Studio, bringing you interesting technology stories. See you next time.